My name is Lauren Morgan. I'm 31 years old. And last Thanksgiving, I received a gold embossed invitation that felt less like a welcome and more like a summons. To them, it was just another family dinner at the estate, another photo op in cream and navy, another carefully staged chapter in the Morgan family legacy, where Kayla shined in the center and I simply didn't exist. For years, I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't care about being cropped out of their annual family photos, that I didn't care when my name disappeared from group texts, from board meetings, from holiday speeches. But when I opened a folder hidden in my aunt's closet, a folder containing a copy of my grandfather's original will, something in me snapped. Turns out, I wasn't just excluded from the photos. I was written out of my own inheritance, erased on paper, in ink, by people who smiled at me across dinner tables. Before I tell you how I walked back into that boardroom and forced them to read the fine print they hoped I'd never find, tell me in the comments, have you ever been made to feel invisible by the people who should have seen you best? And if you've ever been erased, but chose facts over fury, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because this story isn't about revenge, it's about receipts. I stared at the screen, blinking once, then again. The glossy shot was already edited, filtered, and posted. Everyone beamed in coordinating shades of cream and navy, posed on the front lawn of the house I grew up in, now merely referred to as the estate, in group texts I hadn't been part of in years. My mother, Judith, stood center, arms wrapped neatly around Kayla and Charles. Kayla's smile was practically a billboard, perfect teeth, fresh blowout, that practiced tilt of the chin. A golden daughter. Last year, they'd said, you were traveling, and I had been. A consulting trip I'd worked months to afford. This year, I was 3 blocks away, sipping reheated coffee in my apartment with peeling linoleum and one faulty window that never quite closed. A ping. A message from Mom. Judith Morgan. I thought you were busy, darling. You've always got something going on. Polite, practiced, and cold. I stared at the message, not replying. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled through the comments under the photo. Likes from family friends, old neighbors, distant cousins. Beautiful family. Kayla looks stunning as always. So proud of the Morgans. No one noticed the absence. Or maybe they did and didn't care. I dialed Kayla, straight to voicemail. No surprise. Her phone always seemed to magically shut off whenever things got uncomfortable. A family trait she'd inherited from our father, Charles. He was a man of few words, and even fewer opinions when Judith spoke. I tossed my phone onto the couch and stared at the bookshelf across the room. Second shelf from the top, left side. That blue folder still sat there. The original proposal for the Morgan Youth Financial Literacy Project. My idea. My framework. My research. I'd developed it as an outreach pilot during my graduate program. Kayla had called it cute. A few months ago, I'd overheard a colleague mention a prestigious scholarship Kayla had won, the Weston Civic Award. They said it was for her outstanding contributions to community financial literacy. The title was too specific, too familiar. At the time, I hadn't pressed. I told myself I was being paranoid, bitter even. But now, with that photo on my screen, that proud, polished, complete family photo, something snapped. I pulled open the folder, flipping through the pages. My name still watermarked faintly on the proposal. The timeline of the first community pilot clearly dated back 2 years before Kayla launched her version. I opened her LinkedIn. There it was. Weston Civic Scholar 2023. Creator of the Morgan Financial Pathways Initiative. I exhaled sharply, bile rising in my throat. She hadn't just stolen the project. She'd rebranded it with our last name. And Mom must have known. Judith ran the narrative in our family like a CEO ran quarterly reports. She curated everything, down to what color we wore for photos, what we posted online, what we said in interviews. I stared at the photo again. That manicured lawn, that white painted porch, that false symmetry. I wasn't just missing from the picture. I had been erased. I thought of the countless nights I stayed up writing that proposal, the weekends I volunteered at youth centers testing curriculum, the rejections I'd faced before one small nonprofit finally took a chance on me. And now, Kayla had walked into the Weston Gala in a silk dress and accepted my future like it was her birthright. So this time, they didn't just erase me from the photo. They took my future too. Silence was our family's favorite language, especially when it hurts the most. It wasn't the absence of sound that made it so cruel. It was what it left behind. The words never said, the truths swallowed, the affections rationed like wartime sugar. In our house, silence wasn't peace. It was punishment. The kitchen hadn't changed much since I was a teenager. Same soft cream walls, same lemon-scented polish on the counter, same oversized refrigerator covered in magnets from cities only Kayla had visited. I was 17 when the envelope arrived. Thick, embossed, with the university's crest. MBA, full acceptance, conditional on funding. I had printed out the email, tucked it in a folder, and placed it neatly beside my mom's coffee that morning. She'd glanced at it, took a sip of her espresso, and muttered, "Yeah, just that. No congratulations, no questions, no follow-up." The same week, Kayla received her acceptance to a fashion institute in Paris. Judith threw a party. There were candles, champagne, a small catered spread with croissants, and Eiffel Tower-shaped cupcakes. Dad even wore a beret. Ironically, of course. Kayla floated around in a vintage Chanel dress, laughing like she belonged to some other world. Every guest hugged her like she'd won a Nobel. No one noticed me sitting on the staircase, holding the envelope I'd once thought would change everything. Dad came over at one point. He patted my shoulder and said, "You've always been the brainy one, Lauren. Don't worry. You'll figure it out." But he never challenged Mom. Never asked why Kayla's dreams warranted a gala and mine got a grunt. That was the thing about Charles Morgan. He never yelled, never argued. He just agreed by omission. Later that night, I cornered him in the hallway, my acceptance letter in hand. "Dad, I got in, but I need help with tuition. Even a loan. Just until I get through the first year." He looked at me, genuinely uncomfortable, as if I'd just asked him to pick a favorite daughter out loud. "You know, sweetheart, the timing's just not great. Things are tight after Kayla's deposit." He meant Paris. Her apartment, her tuition, her designer supplies. I remember staring at the family portrait on the wall. Not the one they took last week, but an older one. Me in braces, Kayla in curls. I was taller then, still full of hope. Aunt Linda had been at the party too, Judith's sister. Quieter, a little out of place in the Morgan brand of perfection. While everyone gushed over Kayla, I caught Linda watching me. Her expression unreadable. Not pity, not exactly. Something heavier. She raised her glass, nodded once, and looked away. That silent nod stuck with me for years. A week later, Judith handed me a spreadsheet and said, "If you're really serious about this whole MBA thing, help me fix this mess." Their company, a boutique luxury home brand, had been bleeding for months. I buried myself in financial records, inventory data, vendor contracts. I restructured their supply chain model, renegotiated logistics, flagged 3 departments for inefficiency. It wasn't glamorous, but within 4 months, the numbers started to turn. Not one thank you, not from Judith, not from Charles. Kayla once joked, over dinner, "Lauren's just living data. She breathes in air, spits out spreadsheets, Everyone laughed, even Dad. And yet, when the company was floundering, guess whose spreadsheet saved it? They mailed me a check. $500. For all I'd done. The envelope was thin, light, unassuming. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably Judith's. Sharp, meticulous cursive that never once slanted, not even when she was angry. It waited in my mailbox like an insult-wearing perfume. It had been raining that afternoon. The kind of Boston rain that didn't fall, exactly, but hovered, damp and invasive, like a reminder of everything unsaid. I held the envelope in my hand as I walked up the stairs, shoes squeaking faintly against the wood of my apartment building. My coat dripped water onto the mail. Inside, I tossed my bag to the floor and peeled off my coat, already dreading what awaited in that envelope. Bills, maybe? A letter from some extended family member who remembered me once a year. Certainly not what I actually got. The check fluttered out first. $500, dated 3 days ago. The note came next. No salutation, no signature, just 2 sentences printed in my mother's careful script. Thank you for the spreadsheet. Thought you could use a little something. That was it. Not even my name. The absurdity struck me first. Then the fury. But it wasn't hot, clean rage. It was that bone-deep ache that comes when the people who should know you best show they never did. A voice startled me. Everything okay, Lauren? It was Marissa, my colleague from across the hall. She had come to drop off a shared report we were reviewing. Her eyes flicked to the check in my hand. I tried to smile. Yeah, family stuff. She nodded, clearly not buying it, but polite enough not to pry. After she left, I sat on the edge of my couch, still staring at the check. It felt radioactive. $500 for saving their damn business. In 2022, they'd been weeks away from a loan default. I'd spent night after night restructuring their corporate debt, negotiating terms with private lenders, even catching a tax error that could have triggered an audit. And this was their gratitude, a casual, barely taxable token of appreciation. I called Mom, straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same thing. I texted Kayla. Me. Did you know about this check? She replied in under 2 minutes. Kayla. You should be grateful that you're remembered. Some of us work for free out of love, Lauren. Love. That word. I stared at it until it blurred. Then I did something I never did. I cried. In the office. Silent, tight-throated sobs that cracked out of me in short, sharp gasps. I grabbed a tissue and turned away from my monitor, hoping no one walked in. This wasn't heartbreak. This was humiliation. The kind that makes you question every quiet sacrifice you ever made. When the tears dried, something hardened inside me. I logged onto the bank's website and canceled the deposit. They'd never see that transaction clear. Then, I opened a folder on my computer labeled Morgan Finances, something I hadn't touched in months, and began opening subfolders. Tax returns, invoice drafts, scanned contracts, vendor emails. Every time I'd helped, I had archived the documentation, not because I anticipated betrayal, but because part of me always knew it was possible. If they wanted to treat me like a contractor, I'd send them the invoice they deserved. My aunt showed up uninvited, but she brought truth to her. I heard the knock just after 7, sharp and deliberate. Not the uncertain tap of a neighbor or the lazy rhythm of a friend. It had weight. When I opened the door, there she stood. Linda Morgan, trench coat still damp from the rain, a tote bag slung over one shoulder. She looked older than I remembered. Tired in the way people look when they've carried guilt too long. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her voice cautious. You are, I replied. But I stepped aside anyway. She walked in slowly, as though entering sacred ground. Her eyes swept the apartment, resting on nothing and everything, the book stacked by the window, the notes taped above my desk, the half-eaten takeout on the counter. She took it in like a snapshot of the life I'd built on the edge of their empire. "I didn't come to defend anyone," she said, settling into the chair by the window. "Especially not Judith." That name, spoken aloud in my apartment, felt like someone had set off an alarm. I crossed my arms. "Then why are you here?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. It looked old, creased, with yellowing edges. "Because I should have said something a long time ago." I didn't move. "You remember when you were 16?" she asked. "When your grandfather was still alive." "Of course I do. He's the only one who ever told me I was smart without sounding surprised." Linda gave a sad little smile. "He adored you. You know, he once said, 'Lauren's the one who'll keep the Morgans honest.'" I felt something crack open in my chest. A memory of his hand on my shoulder, the scent of his tobacco, the way he used to call me his North Star. Linda opened the folder slowly. Inside was a faded photocopy, a legal document, clearly marked, "Last Will and Testament, Raymond J. Morgan." I stepped closer. "This is a copy of the original will," she said, "before Judith convinced your father to update it. My name was there, in black and white. Lauren Morgan is to receive 30% equity in the Morgan family holdings and full ownership of the Cape Cod property." I stared at it, numb. "When he passed, Judith took control of the estate transition. Your father didn't even ask questions. He signed everything she put in front of him." "You knew?" My voice trembled. Linda's eyes didn't flinch. "I didn't know the extent. Not then. But I found this copy in one of Dad's old boxes last spring. I wasn't sure what to do with it, until I saw what they've done to you." I dropped into the chair across from her, hands shaking. "Why now?" She looked down. "Because I watched you help save the company, because I saw that check they mailed, and because—" She hesitated. "Kayla doesn't need to fight you. Your mother has done it all." The words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, breath shallow. Not because it was shocking, but because it wasn't. I'd felt it my whole life. The redirection, the invisible hands moving pieces around me. Now someone had finally said it. Linda slid the folder toward me. "I don't have the authority to change anything, but I can give you the truth. What you do with it, that's up to you." She stood and smoothed her coat. "I won't stay. I just wanted you to know you're not imagining things." I walked her to the door, too stunned to form a proper goodbye. When the door shut behind her, I leaned against it, staring at the folder in my hand. I wasn't crazy. I was erased. They wanted silence. I gave them strategy. The folder sat open on my dining table like a crime scene photo, every page a testament to the years I'd spent being erased one polite slight at a time. But this wasn't grief anymore. It was logistics. And logistics, I understood. I started with the bank. The family business still used the same institution, Fisher and Gold. I'd helped set up their new vendor payment structure in 2021, back when Judith still feigned courtesy, and Charles used to leave fruit baskets in my office as thanks. That history bought me just enough plausible connection to request a transaction statement from the shared operations account. I walked into the Boston branch in a blazer I hadn't worn in months, greeted the receptionist with a smile that said "routine audit," and asked to speak with the manager. "Of course, Ms. Morgan," the woman replied. "Do you still have signature authority on file?" "I believe I do," I said. "Just need to confirm a few things for the 2022 restructuring records." It wasn't technically a lie. The manager pulled up the records with a few clicks and printed them for me, a little surprised by how fast the system still recognized my access. Outside, I folded the statement into my bag and walked the long route home, letting the cold fall air sharpen my thoughts. Each transaction was a breadcrumb. I'd follow them straight into the dark. Back at the apartment, I poured a cup of coffee and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Columns for dates, vendors, documents sent, and account approvals. Each row was a puzzle piece. Within an hour, the pattern started to emerge. Kayla had submitted an application for the Ashcroft Fellowship last fall, using a strategic growth model titled Reclaiming Boutique Profitability in Post-Pandemic Markets. I knew that title. I had written that file. The original lived on a USB drive buried in my filing cabinet, dated October 2020. I retrieved it and opened the document. Word for word, it matched the fellowship submission. Even the footnotes were intact. She hadn't just borrowed the structure. She had plagiarized the entire thing. I leaned back, hands steepled. This wasn't theft. It was strategy. But now it was my turn. Linda arrived just before 7, carrying takeout and a sense of shared purpose. "You've been busy," she said, setting the bag down and eyeing the papers scattered across the table. "I don't do idle very well," I replied, handing her a printout. "This is the scholarship proposal Kayla submitted last year." Linda read it silently. Her face darkened. "And this?" she asked, lifting the second sheet. "My draft. From 2 years earlier." She didn't speak for a long time. "I want to prepare a legal letter," I said. "Not to send. Not yet. Just to get the wording right." Linda nodded. "Do you have someone in mind?" I did. I hadn't spoken to Thomas Baird in nearly 2 years, but when you work in corporate internal investigations, some bonds don't fade. Thomas was a former litigator with a spine made of statutes. He helped me untangle a whistleblower case in 2021. An executive embezzling funds through dummy vendors. We'd spent 3 months buried in spreadsheets and discovery files, and by the end of it, he said, "If you ever need a scalpel instead of a hammer, call me." I drafted the letter that night. Calm, precise, unemotional. It cited the duplication, the timelines, the breach of intellectual property, the damages, if necessary. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise wrapped in legalese. Then I opened the folder one more time, inserted both versions of the proposal, mine and Kayla's, and hit print. I pressed print. Then I smiled. If you follow the money, eventually you find fingerprints. I'd spent the morning staring at the walls of my apartment, the kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from calculation. The scholarship proposal had been theft. Elegant, deliberate. But something about it felt too familiar, too polished. Kayla had always been careless with details. She didn't build systems. She inherited them. Judith, on the other hand, knew exactly how to move through paper trails without leaving a ripple. So I dug deeper. The Morgan Family Holdings account had once listed me as a junior partner. A quiet arrangement that began in 2018 when I helped streamline our overhead costs. Charles had said it was a token of trust. Judith said nothing, but the papers were signed. I remembered sitting in the old accounting office downtown. Lemon-scented wood polish in the air, my hand trembling just slightly as I signed. I returned to that same office on a cloudy Tuesday, nearly 6 years later. Harold Briggs hadn't changed much. Older, a little slower, but still meticulous. The kind of accountant who remembered account numbers like they were birthdays. "I didn't expect to see you again, Lauren," he said, shaking my hand with a mix of warmth and worry. "Your mother told me you'd moved on." "I did," I said, "but I left a few things behind." He sat back, hands folded. "What are you looking for?" "The old shared account. The one that used my name as secondary authorization. I need to see if anything was signed under that designation in 2022. Harold hesitated. "I can't give you family statements without permission." I slid a letter across the table. Linda's signature was at the bottom. As a surviving board member and partial stakeholder, she had just enough authority to authorize the review. He sighed and nodded, tapping his keyboard. 5 minutes later, he frowned. That's strange. What is? He turned the screen toward me. In May 2022, there was a credit line increase application. It required 2 signatures. This shows Judith and you. My heart sank. I never signed that. He clicked through several pages. There's a scanned copy here. He opened the file and there it was. My name, my handwriting, even the little upward curve on the L. But it wasn't mine. It was an imitation. Too perfect. Who submitted it? I asked. Judith emailed the documents, but Kayla CC'd me with a follow-up. Want to see it? I nodded. He clicked open the message. From Kayla.Morgan@morganholdings.com to Harold.Briggs at subject, follow up on loan docs body. Let's get this processed before my sister notices. She's been busy anyway. I stared at the screen. There it was. Intent, timing, deception, and my name, forged like it was theirs to use. Can I get a printout of that email? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Of course, Harold said. But Lauren, this is serious. That's felony territory. I know, I replied, placing the printout gently into my folder. I stopped at the coffee shop across the street. A narrow space with chipped tile floors and the smell of burnt espresso hanging in the air. I didn't need caffeine. I needed stillness. Somewhere outside my apartment. Somewhere I could process what I'd just confirmed. I slid the page out of the folder and read it again. Not once. Not even twice. Over and over until the words seared into me like a scar I'd always suspected but had never seen. Kayla forged my name, and Mom let her. They invited me this year. I almost laughed. The gold-embossed envelope arrived 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, addressed to Miss Lauren Morgan, as though formality might disguise history. Inside was a folded cream card with calligraphic script. We would be delighted if you joined us for Thanksgiving dinner at the family estate. The word delighted was doing a lot of work. I turned it over twice, checking for sarcasm. There was none. Only practiced politeness and the faint scent of Judith's favorite lavender stationery. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a summons. And for the first time in years, I accepted it. On Thanksgiving morning, I dressed with intention. A tailored navy sheath dress, black suede heels, hair pulled into a low bun. Simple, sharp. A quiet declaration that I wasn't the girl they'd pushed to the margins. I was the storm they'd invited indoors. The Morgan mansion hadn't changed. Stone pillars, wrought iron gates, windows that blinked like cold eyes. Inside, the house smelled of roast turkey, cranberry sauce, and expensive silence. Lauren, Judith greeted me with open arms that never touched me. So glad you could make it. Of course, I replied, kissing the air near her cheek. Kayla emerged from the hallway, wearing an oversized cream sweater and too much blush. Her smile faltered for half a second. Hey, stranger. Hey yourself. I didn't comment on the sudden warmth in their welcome. I didn't need to. Charles hovered behind them, quiet as ever, but his eyes lingered on me longer than usual, as though he was waiting for something. The dining room was awash in muted golds and reds, the table set with grandmother's china and far too many forks. Aunt Peggy had brought her usual cornbread stuffing. Uncle Max was already 2 glasses of wine deep, and Linda sat at the far end, eyes sharp, mouth tight, saying nothing but watching everything. I took the seat across from Kayla. Dinner started with the usual. Small talk, blessings, the annual toast to family legacy that Judith gave as though reading from a throne. I sipped my wine and let the room swirl around me. Then Kayla spoke. I've been working on my own firm lately, she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin. A consulting startup. It's focused on modern financial analysis techniques. Real cutting-edge algorithms and predictive modeling. Oh? I raised an eyebrow. Sounds familiar. She blinked. Well, the market is competitive, you know. Everyone's trying to get ahead. Sure, I said, swirling my wine. Some files travel far, don't they? The words hung in the air like perfume gone sour. Kayla's expression twitched, just slightly. A flicker of something between recognition and dread. She recovered fast. Data's everywhere these days. I took another sip. Yes, especially when you don't create it yourself. Judith's fork clattered to the floor. Every head turned. Oh, my hand slipped, she said, reaching down too slowly. Charles reached faster, but their fingers bumped. His hand withdrew. I'll get a new one, Kayla said quickly, rising. But my eyes were still on my mother. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her wine glass. She didn't meet my gaze. I wasn't sure whose hands were shaking more, hers or mine. You can't steal someone's legacy and expect no invoice. Sam Chen's office hadn't changed in the 5 years since we last worked together, still lined with dark oak bookshelves and that same impossible-to-kill cactus perched beside his monitor. He looked up when I entered, glasses sliding a little down his nose, his usual dry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Lauren Morgan, he said. Either you're back in mergers, or someone pissed you off. Column B, I replied, dropping a red folder onto his desk. They forged my name, stole my work, and used it to secure a scholarship and funding for a company that's essentially my architecture in a new skin. He leaned back, flipping open the folder. A slow whistle escaped his lips as he scanned the evidence. Damn, that's not casual theft. That's deliberate. I nodded. I don't want to sue. Not yet. I want them to feel the floor tilt. Just enough to make them sweat. He turned to his screen and began typing. We can draft a notice of intellectual property misuse. It's not a lawsuit. It's a request for clarification. But it's wrapped in legal language sharp enough to draw blood. I handed him the email from Harold, the printout with Kayla's follow-up, and a screenshot of the Scholarship Foundation's announcement featuring her name and my stolen analysis. You're not playing around, he murmured. Is that your aunt's statement too? Linda's on board, I said. She's confirming that I authored the original materials in 2021. She also has a backup of the files from when we did the joint project. Sam nodded. Perfect. Give me an hour. I spent that hour in the waiting area, staring at a water cooler that hissed every 15 minutes. When he called me back in, the document was ready. It was clean, brutal in tone, polite enough to be professional, direct enough to draw panic. 2. Kayla.morgan@morganholdings.com, CC. Judith.morgan@morganholdings.com. Subject: Notice of Intellectual Property, Misuse. Response requested enclosed was the summary of forged documents, an outline of the financial impact, and a formal request to cease and desist the use of materials Lauren Morgan had created. I read it twice, then signed at the bottom. Sam scanned and sent it electronically. Certified email and registered service courier. She'll get it in 24 hours, faster by inbox. Later that night, in the dim light of my apartment, my phone pinged. One new message. From Kayla.morgan@morganholdings.com. 2. Sam.chen@. Lauren.morgan@cc. Judith.morgan@subject. Notice body. I don't know what you're trying to do, but it won't work. Kayla. I stared at the screen. A short, angry reply. Defensive. Rushed. But the best part? She copied her reply to Mom. Mistake number 1. I didn't break the house. I just held up a mirror. The phone buzzed at 11:46 p.m., well past the hour when polite calls are made. I was still up, sprawled on the couch with my laptop finalizing invoice records for Sam. When I saw Linda's name flash across the screen, I picked up without hesitation. "You won't believe what just happened," she said. Her voice was breathless, unsteady, tinged with something between awe and disbelief. I think the house cracked. I didn't say a word. I just listened. Linda had been invited to dinner at the Morgan estate that night. An unexpected request from Judith herself, under the guise of keeping the family united before the holidays. What Judith didn't know was that Linda had already crossed a line. She'd chosen a side. "They didn't know I was already in touch with you," Linda said. "They assumed I'd be neutral." She painted the scene for me with careful detail. Judith at the head of the table, Kayla seated to her right like a well-dressed shadow, Charles at the far end, still pretending to read the wine label like it might offer him a way out. Then came the fire. Judith was livid, holding the printed letter Sam had sent like it might burn her fingers. Her voice, Linda said, could have sliced marble. "You left her a trail," she shouted at Kayla. "A digital trail. Are you that foolish?" Kayla's cheeks flushed crimson. "I told you I was handling it." "Handling it?" Judith snapped. "You forged her name on 2 documents. You used her spreadsheet verbatim. This isn't sloppy, it's suicidal." Kayla's voice cracked. "You were the one who said to keep it moving, that we couldn't afford to slow down the application process, that Dad wouldn't cover me again." Charles looked up then, quietly, slowly. Judith continued, not noticing him. "You should have anonymized it, changed formats. I told you to make it untraceable." "And what would that have done?" Kayla fired back. "Made it ethically okay?" Silence. "You didn't care where it came from as long as you got the credit. Just like always." That's when Charles put down his fork. Linda said the sound echoed through the room like a gavel. He stood up, calm but final. "I'm done with this," he said. Judith blinked. "Charles." He didn't respond. He simply walked out of the dining room. His chair remained askew. Kayla's composure broke. Her eyes welled up, and for the first time, maybe in years, she didn't have a comeback. Her shoulders collapsed in on themselves, and her breath hitched. Judith stayed seated, holding that letter like it might still vanish if she gripped hard enough. Linda didn't stay long after. She knew the silence that followed wasn't grief. It was exposure. No one at that table could claim innocence anymore. When she finished telling me everything, I sat very still. "That's what you wanted, isn't it?" she asked. "Not war. Just for them to look in the mirror?" "Exactly," I said. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long while. I didn't sleep. I smiled. My life was never invisible, just inconvenient to theirs. The boardroom was colder than I remembered, the kind of cold that seeped into your knuckles and stayed there. The table was polished like it always had been, though a faint scratch near the edge reminded me of the last time I sat here. 3 years ago, when I was asked to take a break from advisory work so Kayla could get hands-on experience, I had taken that break. They assumed I'd stay gone. I hadn't. A week before this meeting, I'd exercised my right as a minor shareholder to request a seat and presentation time at the quarterly board update. I wasn't sure they'd agree, but maybe curiosity got the better of them. Or fear. The room filled slowly. 5 board members I barely knew anymore. Sam Chen to my left, Linda across the room by the window, her lips a tight, unreadable line. Kayla entered last, wearing a blazer too expensive for her nerves, followed by Judith, who looked like she hadn't slept since Linda's dinner report. They didn't greet me. Sam stood and passed out a 1-page summary to each person. "This presentation is regarding unauthorized use of proprietary intellectual material and financial misrepresentation related to internal documentation." The room stilled. You could hear the air filter hum. I stood, calm but deliberate. "Thank you. This won't take long." I opened the folder and placed 3 items side by side. 1, I said, holding up a printout, is the original file, developed by me in 2022, used to recalibrate the risk tolerance scoring for Morgan Holdings' legacy debt. I handed it to the first board member. 2 is the scholarship submission document Kayla sent in 2023, copied line for line from my file. She did not consult me, nor did she acknowledge my authorship. Silence. I let it settle. 3, I said, drawing out the next sheet, is an internal email from your former accounting manager, Harold Lewis, confirming that Kayla and Judith co-signed 2 credit documents using my name as proxy to inflate their limit. This was done without my consent. The bank's log shows my name forged. The email, I passed it forward, shows Kayla instructing Harold to get it done before my sister finds out. Judith sat perfectly still. Kayla blinked like someone had turned on a spotlight she couldn't escape. I'm not here to demand repayment, I said, voice steady. I'm not suing the company. Yet. But I will be recognized as the rightful architect of the material you've praised, and I will no longer be erased. A board member leaned forward. Ms. Morgan, do you have the original timestamps? Sam nodded. Verified metadata, independent archive backup, notarized. Kayla's voice broke into the quiet. This is a misunderstanding. I thought we were working collaboratively. Judith turned her head slightly but said nothing. Funny, I replied, because the last time we worked collaboratively, I received a $500 check and a card that said, "Thank you for the spreadsheet." Linda exhaled slowly, watching everyone, not blinking. I stepped back. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about respect. And receipts. I walked into that room alone, but the truth walked beside me. The air was brittle, sharp with the scent of coffee that no one had touched. The folder in my hands wasn't heavy, but it felt like the weight of every silence I'd ever swallowed. Every thankless night I'd spent at my desk while Kayla played genius in front of magazine photographers. The boardroom looked exactly as it had an hour ago, but the silence had shifted. Now it waited for someone to speak, and that someone was me. Sam leaned forward just slightly, his presence a quiet anchor at my side. Across the polished table, Kayla's fingers fidgeted under the edge of her lap. Judith sat stiffly, arms crossed like she could will herself into a different reality. I'd like to continue, I said, voice even. You've seen the documents. Intellectual property misappropriation, forged financial authorization forms, and willful misrepresentation to both academic and internal parties. I let my eyes scan the board members. None of them looked away. Under state and federal law, Sam added, each of these acts can constitute fraud. And forgery, specifically of a financial nature, is criminal. Ms. Morgan, he nodded toward me, has the right to press charges. However, she is not interested in that. Yet. Not interested in revenge, I repeated softly, but I am interested in integrity, which has been missing from this company for a very long time. Judith cleared her throat. Are we going to pretend this isn't a family disagreement being aired out in front of strangers? Sam tilted his head. Strangers who have fiduciary duty to this company, not to family squabbles. The chair of the board, Mr. Callahan, glanced between them. We're calling a vote, he said simply. But first, Judith, Kayla, we'll ask you to step outside. Standard protocol. Kayla blinked, as if she hadn't registered the words. Judith stood slowly, her chair scraping the floor like a blade against glass. Kayla followed, but not before giving me a glance, part defiance, part panic. When the door closed, the silence became dense. Charles Morgan stirred. It was the first real motion I'd seen from him in months. I want to say something, he said. Everyone turned. I should have spoken sooner, he began, voice rough with shame. Back in 2020, when the company was hemorrhaging, We needed a pivot. Judith wanted to sell off half the holdings. Kayla suggested we rebrand. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw not the quiet man who always stood behind others, but a father. But Lauren, he said, his voice gaining strength, was the only one who brought a plan that worked. She rewrote our debt structure, renegotiated 2 major supplier contracts, and presented a 3-year turnaround roadmap. He looked down, then back up. I knew it, and I let her get pushed aside. No one interrupted. Callahan finally nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We'll proceed." The vote was brief, efficient. Not one voice raised in opposition. "Effective immediately," Callahan said. "Kayla Morgan is suspended from all leadership duties for 90 days, pending an internal ethics investigation. Judith Morgan is suspended from all executive privileges for the same period. A temporary review committee will be formed." He looked at me. "Ms. Morgan, Lauren, we'd like to appoint you as an honorary strategic advisor to the board, effective today." I said nothing at first. I didn't trust my voice, but I nodded. Slowly, deliberately. The door opened again. Kayla and Judith walked back in. Callahan repeated the verdict. Judith didn't flinch. "Kayla." She shook. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her gaze swung to mine. "Why now?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Why are you doing this now?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. When they fall, they don't fall quietly. It started with the headlines. A whisper turned into a leak, the leak into a current, until the current burst the dam entirely. "Heir or thief?" Inside Morgan's implosion. The title blinked across every screen that mattered, shared in finance circles, whispered through alumni forums, and emailed in quiet disbelief between old clients of the Morgan estate firm. I didn't write it. I didn't have to. I just made sure the truth reached the right ears. Linda had forwarded me the first screenshot before the article even went live. One text, no caption. Judith's calling Charles. Again. Begging him to block it. 2 minutes later, another. He told her no. From a woman who once choreographed family photos like war campaigns, Judith was suddenly invisible. Not absent, no, but ghosted from the spotlight she used to command. The article quoted anonymous board members, highlighted scholarship inconsistencies, and, most damningly, confirmed Kayla's signature was under review by state education authorities. The word forgery didn't appear, but the implication dripped from every line. I imagined Judith sitting in her marble kitchen, surrounded by silence. The same silence she trained the rest of us to fear. Linda confirmed what I suspected. Judith was unraveling. "She's blaming Kayla," she said over the phone. "Said she should have hidden it better. Called it youthful arrogance." "And Kayla?" I asked. There was a pause. "She screamed," Linda finally said. "Told her mother she never wanted to fake anything, that she just wanted to be enough. For once." She said Judith forced her into a version of success that was never hers to begin with. I couldn't stop the sound that slipped out. A sharp exhale that could have been a laugh or a wince. Maybe both. In Sam's office, we watched the stock ripple. The Morgan family company wasn't public, but the holdings were wide enough to cause movement. A few longtime partners requested review of past financials. Some contracts went under evaluation. One even pulled out entirely. Respect evaporates faster than wealth ever does. "She's going to call," Sam said. "Be ready." She did. That evening, I let it ring twice, 3 times. Then I picked up. "Lauren?" Her voice cracked like frost breaking underfoot. Silence stretched. "You won," she said, broken. You've destroyed everything." I looked out the window, not at the skyline, but at my own reflection in the glass. Not taller, not triumphant, just still standing. "No," I whispered. "I just survived you." Then I ended the call. Blood gives you a name. It doesn't give you a claim. The room was unusually warm for mid-January, not from weather or heating, but from tension. I sat at the long glass table, eyes steady on the reflection of the chandelier above us, while across from me sat the remnants of a dynasty that once refused to acknowledge I existed. Judith wore gray, an odd choice for someone who once said, "Color is power." Kayla sat 2 seats down, jaw tight, lip trembling even as she tried to mask it with a dismissive shrug. Charles stood near the end, hand resting lightly on a stack of legal folders. Sam, our lawyer, was already seated beside me. Linda, quiet as ever, watched everything without blinking. I've called this meeting to clarify matters that have remained unbalanced for too long, Charles began, voice even but low. There was a time I trusted decisions made in my name. That time has passed. A quiet cough from the man at his left, the estate lawyer. Gray hair, clean cut, paper-thin patience. Charles continued. I've reviewed the will that Judith submitted in 2021. It was drafted without my full review or consent. There are discrepancies and signatures placed during times I was out of the country. I didn't blink. Kayla scoffed, barely hiding her contempt. So you're saying you didn't notice for 3 years? That's ridiculous. The estate lawyer raised a hand. We've also confirmed the legal inconsistency. There is an investigation pending, but in the meantime, Mr. Morgan has submitted and signed a revised will. This one, he tapped the folder, has been witnessed, reviewed, and notarized in accordance with Massachusetts inheritance law. Kayla's knuckles turned white against the chair arms. Charles looked at me, then turned back to the others. Lauren is to receive 40% of the estate and full administrative control of the Morgan Scholarship Fund. Judith's face was a mask of disbelief, her lips parted as if mid-thought, but no sound followed. She stared not at Charles but at the paper now in his hands, the paper that undid years of quiet sabotage. Kayla slammed a palm on the table. I'm the only one in business, she hissed, cheeks flushed. She's just a... Lauren is the only one who understands honor, Charles cut in. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It rang, like a closing door. Kayla stood up, then sat down again. She didn't storm out this time. Something had shifted. There was nowhere left to run. Judith reached for her glass of water and missed. Judith stood frozen. For the first time, she looked small. I walked through the ruins, not to mourn, but to rebuild. The old administrative building on Tremont Street had been converted into the new headquarters of the Morgan Foundation for Truth and Equity. The sign gleamed modestly under the early February sun, brass letters clean and clear. A different kind of legacy now lived there. One not built on illusions of grandeur, but on the quiet dignity of starting again. Inside, the floors still smelled faintly of varnish. Linda was reviewing a list of scholarship applicants beside a row of file boxes. Her glasses slipped down her nose as she read, pausing only to smile when I passed. You did what they never understood, she said softly. Rebirth from your pain. There was no celebration, no ribbon cutting, just systems, process, purpose. We visited my old school the following Tuesday. It hadn't changed much. The paint was still chipped near the entrance and the hallway clock still ticked a beat too slow. But the counselor's office looked brighter than I remembered. The girl's name was Naya, 16, a math prodigy with no family support. She avoided eye contact when I handed her the letter, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded it. Full tuition, living stipend, mentorship access. From someone who knew what it meant to be invisible. When she finally looked up, I nodded. No one should have to earn love through numbers, I told her. Back at the foundation, Sam updated me on our new pilot project, a financial literacy program for women over 40 who had never handled household money. The irony didn't escape me. I used to run budgets for people who thought receipts were for accountants. Now I helped the overlooked become sovereign. One afternoon, a stack of mail landed on my desk. Most of it was formal. Thank you notes, invites, documents. But one envelope stood out. No return address, no label. Just my name, written in familiar loops. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do regret. You didn't deserve the silence I helped build around you. I wanted to be everything, and I became nothing. I'm sorry. K double quote. There was no signature, but it didn't need one. I read it twice, then a third time. The paper trembled slightly in my fingers, though my hands were still. In the corner of my office was a small fireplace, ornamental mostly, but I lit it that evening, just once. I burned the letter, but not the lesson. They asked me for help once. Now they ask me to forgive. March in Boston always felt like a false promise. Sunshine, but cold. Buds, but no bloom. A city poised at the edge of spring, unsure whether to trust the thaw. And yet, the front of the new Morgan Scholarship Center was lit with daffodils. Imported, probably, but bright, just the same. My name was on the building now, not as a donor, as the founder. Inside, every chair was filled. Students, faculty, board members, partners from foundations who'd once ignored my emails now asked for handshakes. They spoke of vision and resilience. I didn't flinch. I'd heard those words before, used to bury silence, to decorate betrayal. But today, they weren't empty. Today, they came from people who had seen the receipts. Linda was already inside, seated beside Charles. He looked older, maybe for the first time. Still tall, still composed, but quieter somehow. When he stood to greet me, he didn't speak, just offered a nod of respect. That finally felt real. Judith arrived 10 minutes late. Kayla followed behind her, hair pulled back tight, eyes scanning the room like she wasn't sure which face might spit or smile. Judith caught up to me just before I reached the stage. "Lauren," she said, smoothing her coat, "if it weren't for you, this fund wouldn't exist. I just want you to know that." I turned. She looked smaller now, not in size, but in presence. The woman who once curated me out of every photograph now stood here, hoping I'd curate her into something that mattered. Kayla stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "I just want you to know, I regret it." I studied her. This sister I once thought might be saved, or at least softened. But regret wasn't redemption. It was recognition, an overdue one. "Regret is the first step," I said quietly. "Justice is the last step." I walked away before either of them could answer. The ceremony wasn't long. Speeches were short. Blessings, applause, more of the usual. And then it was my turn. I took the stage, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the crowd. Faces of young students, parents with tired hope, teachers with pride in their spines. "Sometimes," I began, "the ones you least expect are the ones who rebuild the family name." The room was still. No one clapped right away. They listened. They understood. They looked up to me that day. But I wasn't looking back. They once cut her out of every picture, every plan, every promise. But when truth arrived, backed by facts, witnesses, and quiet fury, it didn't knock. It dismantled the door. Justice doesn't chase the loudest voice. It waits for the one who never stopped watching, remembering, and preparing. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates long after the silence breaks, because no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story resonated with you, If you've ever sat quietly at the edge of a family photo, watched someone else wear your work like a crown, or been told to stay silent for the sake of family unity, this is your reminder. You don't owe anyone your invisibility. You don't have to shrink to keep the peace. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to show the receipts, let the truth speak, and let the silence fall where it belongs, on them, not you. If you've ever lived through something like this, leave a comment below, tell your story, because the more we speak, the less room there is for people who thrive on rewriting ours. And if you want more stories about reclaiming your voice, your work, and your place at the table, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.